Heroes, Chapter 3. I feel like a spy in disguise as I walk the streets of Frenchtown, hidden behind the scarf and the bandage, making my way through the chilled morning, pausing on the corners, watching the people come and go, and then moving on when I feel their eyes on me filled with either pity or curiosity. I try to avoid eye contact with people I know, like Mr. Molyneux, the butcher, who stands in the doorway of his meat market in his blood-stained apron, and Mrs. St. Pierre, who scowls her disapproval at him as she passes. I have places to visit now that I have returned, and one of them is the 6th Street and the gray three-decker where Nicole Renard lived with her mother and father on the second floor in number 212. I know she doesn't live there anymore, and I have nothing to gain by going there, but it's inevitable that I look at her house again. I stand across the street for a long time, staring up at the blank windows and with their white lace curtains. After a while, a child's small face appears at the window on the second floor, like the ghost of the little girl Nicole once was. I smile up at the child, and she draws away from the window, disappearing the way Nicole disappeared from Frenchtown. Or was the child a momentary hallucination? Crossing the street, I climb the stairs to the first floor piazza, and I look at the nameplates beside the black mailboxes. Levington, Morisset, Tordy. The Morisset nameplate shines with newness and has taken the place of Renard. I stare at the final proof that Nicole has gone away. I don't know where they went, the Renards. They left without warning in the middle of the night. Can answer the first question based on this reading. Um, Look at the choice of word as he describes the child, and what does that word suggest about Nicole's childhood? What does ghost suggest about ghost about her childhood? What do ghosts do? That's what Norman Rochelle told me in a village outside Rona one evening. His outfit came through the village we were occupying temporarily, and we recognized each other from across the street. He was older by 3 years, but we had both gone to St. Jude's parochial school, and we talked about Sister Petunia in the 6th grade, who was notorious with the ruler. Extend your palm, she'd order for the slightest infraction. The ruler descended almost mechanically. Norman and I made a swap, my ration of Chesterfields, which I did not smoke anyway, for his military edition of The Great Gatsby, which I'd heard was a great novel. We continued to talk about the old days in Frenchtown as we drank vin rouge, like heroes in a Hemingway novel, sitting on the steps of a bombed-out farmhouse. As twilight softened the ragged edges of the broken houses and the wine began to lower my defenses, I got up the courage to ask him, "Hear anything about the Renards?" almost afraid to say her name. He said it for me, Nicole. Then, didn't you go out with her for a while? Hearing her name aloud on the evening air in a foreign country, I was unable to find my voice. Yes, she was my girl, I said finally, giving in to the rush of memories, our lips meeting, her hand in mine, as we walked down Mechanic Street, the cologne like spring flowers that always clung to her. Dragging on the cigarette and releasing the smoke in his mouth and nostrils, he told me about the family's sudden departure from Frenchtown. More than that. All kinds of rumors about her, Frances. She began to stay at home, didn't come out of the house except for the 5:30 morning mass, the nuns' mass, which nobody in their right mind ever goes to. She was like, he gestured with the cigarette, trying to find the right word, a hermit. Then she was gone. Her and her family left Frenchtown without telling anybody. Gazing at me curiously, "Haven't you heard from her?" "No," I answered. He squinted at me, curiosity remaining in his eyes. "You're about 15, right? How did you get into the army?" I told him about forging my birth certificate. He didn't ask why I joined, and I didn't expect him to. Everyone wanted to go to war in those days, to defeat the Japs and the Germans. After a while, we fell into a tired end of long day silence. Then he left to rejoin his outfit, walking off into the twilight. He turned, and we saluted each other in a half-joking way, grinning because we didn't think of ourselves as soldiers, but only as two Frenchtown boys in uniform, and I had not yet killed anybody. Okay, you should be able to answer these two questions. What rumor does Rochelle reveal about Nicole that is troubling? And how did Frances get into the army? As I turn to go back down the steps at 212 6th Street, the front door swings open to reveal a woman in a damp apron, a broom in her hand, looking at me with narrow, suspicious eyes. You want something? She asks. I wonder if she's using her broom as a weapon to protect her, and I don't blame her. I have to keep reminding myself how I look to other people. Do you know where the Renards went? Not expecting an answer, but hoping that the question provides me with respectability. What, she asks, frowning as she clutches the broom in front of her. The scarf has muffled my voice, of course. The Renards, I say, trying to pronounce the words distinctly. Where are they? All gone, she says, her voice doleful. All gone. She begins sweeping the doorsteps as if she intends to sweep me away, too. Her words chase me down into the street. All gone. All gone. Okay, you should be able to answer the next question. What does the woman in the damp apron holding a broom tell Frances? Mrs. Beelander is waiting when I return from 3rd Street, 2 bags of groceries from Hogwarts Market in my arms. I've stocked up on cocoa and bread, strawberry jam, and a variety of Campbell's soup in the red and white cans, mostly tomato and bean and pea soup. Everything's soft because my gums are tender and it's hard for me to chew. I've also bought 2 bottles of pasteurized milk, a pound of butter, and a wedge of cheddar cheese, which I will store in the small electric refrigerator on the counter upstairs. I can keep going on a minimum of food because I lost my appetite somewhere in France, and I eat now only to sustain myself for a while. Mrs. Beelander holds a deep pot in her hands and says, I will carry it up for you, the black bean soup I make. We climb the stairs together. In the tenement, I place the groceries on the counter and she puts the pot on the stove. No boil, she says, just heat. She turns to me. You didn't say your name. Not quite an accusation, but of her feelings, as if her feelings have been hurt. Here's the point where my life becomes a lie. Raymond, I tell her, using the name of my dead brother. Beyond, I add, my mother's name before she married my father. Pierre Mier, she says. I'm ready to give those answers. In Canada, in my mind, I substitute heaven for Canada. We lived in Boston before, but they went back home to Canada when the war came. The truth is that my Uncle Luce, who never became a citizen, returned to Canada while I was in the army. I see the question in her eyes, and I'm quick to answer. I met a Frenchtown boy in the service, Norman Rochelle. He told me about Frenchtown. He made it sound like a nice place to live. Doubt flashes in her eyes, and I make a quick addition to my story. My mother and father are waiting for me in Canada, but I have to report to Fort Delta for treatments for a while. It scares me how easy it is to lie. Vous parlez français? She asks. I shake my head no. I can understand French because of the 8 years with the sisters at St. Jude's, but have never been able to speak the language correctly. She sighs heavily, studies my scarf and bandage for a long moment, murmurs, poor boy again, as she shuffles towards the door. The tenement is heated only by the black stove in the kitchen, fed by the glass oil jug that I will have to fill every day or two from the big metal barrel in the backyard. The stove throws heat only into a small area of the kitchen, and the rest of the tenement is damp with cold, even though winter has gone. I make myself a cup of cocoa, stalling, delaying the moment of going to bed, despite the cold. The clock on the wall in the shape of the banjo tells me it is 20 minutes after 11, which means that a long night stretches ahead. I yearn for sleep, my eyes raw and burning, but I know that the dreams will begin when I close my eyes and drift off. In the bathroom, I apply more Vaseline to my cheeks. Finally, I slip into bed. Mrs. Beelander has provided me with extra blankets. I pull them up to my chin. I double the pillow under my head to prevent the phlegm from running into my throat and causing me to choke. I can never trace the moment where I finally fall asleep, that blurred line between wakefulness and oblivion. While waiting, I silently recite the names of the guys in my platoon: Richards, Edsenberg, Chambers, and yes, Smith, and their first names or nicknames: Eddie, Irwin, Blinky, and Jack. And then more last names: Johnson, Orlandi, Riley, O'Brien, and then their first names: Henry and Sawney and Spooks and Billy. And then start all over again, arranging them this time in alphabetical order, still waiting for sleep to come. What does Francis use to fall asleep? Instead of counting sheep, what does he do? I don't want to think about them, those GIs in my platoon. I don't want to recite their names. I want to forget what happened there in France. But every night the recitation begins like a litany, the names of the GIs like beads on a rosary. I close my eyes and see them advancing in scattered groups through the abandoned village, ruined homes, and debris-cluttered streets, our rifles ready, late afternoon shadows obscuring the windows and doorways in the alley entrances. We are all tense and nervous and scared because the last village seemed peaceful and vacant until sudden gunfire from snipers erupted from those windows and doorways and cut down the advanced patrol just ahead of our platoon. Now I can hear Henry Johnson's ragged breath and Blinky Chambers whistling between his teeth. The village too still, too quiet. Jesus, Sonny Orlandi mutters. Jesus, meaning I'm scared. And so is everyone else, clenched fists holding firearms, quiet curses floating on the air, grunts and hisses and farts. Not like the war movies of the Plymouth. Nobody is displaying heroics or bravado. We are probably taking the final steps of our lives in this village whose name we don't even know. And other villages are waiting ahead of us, and Eddie Richards asks no one in particular, what the hell are we doing here anywhere? And he's clutching his stomach because he has had diarrhea for 3 days, carrying the stink with him all the time so that everyone has been avoiding his presence. Now gunfire erupts, and the same time artillery shells, theirs or ours, boom in the air and explode around us. We run for cover, scrambling and scurrying, hitting the dirt, trying to become part of the buildings themselves, but not safe anywhere. I find myself in a narrow alley, groping through the rising dust, and 2 German soldiers in white uniforms appear like grim ghosts, rifles coming up, but my automatic is too quick, and the head of one of the soldiers explodes like a ripe tomato, and the other cries mama as my gunfire cuts him in half, both halves of him tumbling to the ground. I explode to wakefulness along with the booming artillery, and I find myself gasping, instantly wide-eyed, not cold for once in Mrs. B. Lander's tenement, the sweat warm on my flesh, but in a minute the sweat turns icy. In the alley that day I encountered the German soldiers all right, but my bursts of gunfire killed the soldiers quickly. No exploding head, no body cut in two, although one of them did cry mama as he fell. When I looked down at them in one of those epic, eerie pauses that happens in an attack, a sudden silence that's even more terrible than the exploding shells, I saw how young they were, boys with apple cheeks, too young to shave, like me. Okay, I want you to think about why his dreams are so much more violent than his memories of killing the German soldiers. Why would his dreams be more vivid and disturbing? Hey, Francis, come on, yells Eddie Richards, and I joined him in a scramble out of the alley and into the woods, his smell still heavy in the air. We stumble around in the woods until nighttime when we run across the remains of our platoon and learn that Jack Smith and Billy O'Brien are dead, and that Henry Johnson, wounded, his chest ripped open by shrapnel, carried off somewhere behind the lines, and we never see him again. The next day, the grenade blows off my face. The morning sun slashes my eyelids, and I blink at the daylight spilling through the window. I've survived another night, endured the dreams and memories again. And although I'm not sure anymore which are the dreams and which are the memories, my limbs are stiff and the raw places of my flesh stinging, but I grope from the bed, coughing, my throat filled with phlegm. Ignore it all, I tell myself, and count your blessings. You're back in Frenchtown and your body is functioning. You have a nice dry place to stay and a mission to perform. And maybe this will be the day that Larry LaSalle will appear